In this video we sit down with Mr. Maximilian Busser, founder of Maximilian Busser and Friends, better known of course as MB&F. In a world where everyone seems focused on the destination, here is a man who, well, hasn't quite decided if there even is a destination. However, he sure seems hell-bent on making sure he and all of his friends enjoy the journey. In this interview, we talk all things MB&F, hands down one of the watch industry's most creative and interesting brands. We discuss a variety of topics, including what lies ahead for MB&F and the broader watch industry. Now, I cannot overstate this enough, but I have rarely spoken to a man so passionate, so genuine about what makes him tick. I have no doubt you will enjoy this very inspiring interview with Maximilian Busser.
So, legacy machine perpetual, EVO. It's the incredible Stephen McDonald movement. So Stephen invented over 4 years this revolutionary perpetual calendar for us. We launched it in 2015. It's the most foolproof concept ever made in perpetual calendars, and it's, in my opinion, the most beautiful. 581 components in a hand-winding double barrel perpetual calendar. And on top of all the innovations which went into it, it's the human story of Stephen McDonald, who's part of the watchmakers who helped me save my company in 2007. Then in 2011, I hear that he's in trouble. I go and see him and say, how can I help you? He says, I had an idea. Maybe we could do a new perpetual calendar. I'm like, oh, no. I don't want to do perpetual calendars. And that's how he said, look, well, I've got an idea and I think it actually could solve all the issues that all perpetuals have. And it took him 4 years. And 2015, we were able to present it. We craft about 30 to 35 movements a year of this perpetual calendar. And last year we unveiled what we call the EVO. So the EVO is the watch I created, actually really super, as usual, I feel like saying super selfishly, for myself. I've been living in Dubai for 7 years. And when you live in Dubai, we're lucky that we've got the sea is just next door. And I'm very lucky I've got a swimming pool also. And I jump in there with the kids. And what do I do with a watch with a croco strap? Right. So basically redesigned this to be much more shock-proof, completely water-resistant, integrated rubber strap. Did 3 times 15 pieces last year for our 15th anniversary. And that was the beginning of a whole new story with us. Good grief, the elevator pitch is a thing I hate. The elevator pitches is something which is really complicated for me. I think the easiest way for us to explain is we're crazy dreamers who believe that watchmaking is art, and therefore we deconstruct traditional beautiful watchmaking and reconstruct it into 3D kinetic art pieces which give time. That's more or less the common denominator. Of course, it can be completely crazy pieces coming from more or less my psychotherapy, which is the horological machines. It can be much more cerebral pieces, which are the legacy machines, which are our way of saying thank you to the great master watchmakers of 18th, 19th century. And then you've got an array of weird ideas which circulate around that, but it's always kinetic sculptures giving time. It's always mechanical. It's always about human values, the ones we convey and the ones we want to work with, hence the word and friends. And I think I'll stop there because otherwise I'm just going to go on and on and on and on. So we'll just finish that. For a very long time, I refused the word watches. Even in our press kits or anything, it wouldn't be written watches. Look, at the end of the day, I can't escape what brought me here. We call them horological machines, legacy machines, you name them. We call them kinetic sculptures. But their common essence is that they are watchmaking. Are they watches as the world of watches is today? I beg to differ, even though most people would probably disagree. I see them as my kinetic sculptures. Okay, so the creative process has changed a lot in 16 years. The first piece was insanely cerebral, trying to find myself, who was I, what was important for me, every single detail, like it was the font we used. I mean, just the font, it took us like 350 fonts until I went, I think that's the one. I think my designer, Eric, was going to kill me. And so it was very introspective. It then went into a sketching creative process. So I would have an initial idea on a basic sketch, then we would sketch it further and further, and I was never happy. And the best example is if you take our HM4 Thunderbolt, which was launched in 2010. It started off as a flat watch with 2 dials and a balance wheel, and it ended up looking as a fighter pilot dream, meaning you had the 2 reactors, a plane. But it was a whole process of, maybe we could actually put the dials a little bit like this, and they were at the back, and then slowly we brought them front, and I was like, and then we were vertical, and then why would they be vertical? And wow, we could do like turbines. Let's do turbines. This is a whole process which lasts months. This doesn't happen anymore. Now, I think creativity is a muscle, and if you exercise it a lot, it gets so much more efficient and powerful. So now ideas just pop into my head as are, and more or less, I'll take a good example is the bulldog. The bulldog, as you see it, was as I saw it, because I don't sketch anymore. Now I see. It's a bit scary. It's like I see stuff, and that actually happens when I am completely disconnected from the world. And when are we disconnected from the world? Virtually never. So that's one of the big things which has changed my life in going to Dubai. Not being in the workshops, not being in link with everybody all the time, not being on emails and now on Zooms, is that I can afford myself from time to time. I'll take an hour, go into the garden, and without a phone, without anything, everybody knows they can't speak to me for an hour. That's a long time, an hour. And I just sit there and I think. Now, there have been years where, especially when I had my younger daughters, I would just like fall asleep because I wasn't sleeping at night. But then you start, sometimes I can just think about my life. It doesn't have to be about watches. And sometimes I'll go into, this, and then there's a free-flowing process where you follow an idea, and then you start bringing it in your mind, and it sort of comes into your lap, sort of thing. And if you lose it, you lose it. So you just have to go and come back. This is sort of like, remember Minority Report when Tom Cruise was like on this virtual thing going like that? That's what I sort of do. And I think people are going to put me in a loony bin if I continue talking. But that's what happens now. And I don't sketch anymore. Then actually I sketch afterwards. And then I go and see my team, especially Eric and Serge, our CTO, and I sit down and this is my latest idea. How can we make this come to life? And that's how it works. Are there any boundaries? Yes, the boundaries are, I want to be proud. And I can only be proud if I feel that I am not copying myself, or I am not doing something which has already been done before, either by myself or anybody else. So there are 2 ways of seeing it. Either it's completely new, which doesn't happen all the time. It's been 19 calibers in 16 years. There have been some which have been incredibly new languages, or some are evolutions. I'll take a bulldog from me, even though it's something completely new. Let's face it, it's incorporating virtually every language I had created over the previous 15 years. So it's not completely new. You're going to see the next HM, 2023 if I'm not wrong, which is a complete new design language. So, because at some point I realized this is it. Even though I'm sure we could sell tons of them, I'm sure people will love them, I'm sure there's a complete segment for that. I'm just not interested in that anymore. I want to create something which is completely different. Being creative is, for me, getting out of my comfort zone, taking creative risks, putting myself in danger, creating something which is going to antagonize. It's interesting, when I present my new projects to my team, if everybody likes it at the beginning, I'm like, oh, there's something wrong here. I need to have a part of the team go, oh, what is this? Now, oh, wow. And so that is in the creative process. That's, of course, you've got all the engineering behind, which is, never forget that. I would love to be able to just do a sketch and it comes to life. It's a 3 to 4 year process. It's thousands of hours of engineering, incredible amount of problems to solve. Our movements are like no others. They're not evolutive. We have to recreate completely products from scratch. It's not like, oh, I'll put a power reserve indicator on an existing movement. It's not that. So the challenges we face, or I bring my poor team to face, are infinitely higher than any traditional watch brand. Look, I have to agree with you. The very big brands are facing an enormous challenge, which for those who have got a necessity to grow is a necessity of success. And when you've got a necessity of success, you're not going to take insane creative risks. You're going to stay on the comfort zone. You're going to be evolutive. And of course, everybody's running after icons. For those who've got their icons, it's about bringing different versions of them out. And those who don't have them are grappling to try and create an icon, or at least find one in their archives. I think what's interesting, well, a lot of things, which whole debate this, is today's icons were incredibly disruptive pieces when they came out. And most of them were not successes when they came out because they were much too different and much too clivant, you say in French, much too polarizing. Many years later, 20, 30, 50, 100, 170 years later in some cases, we dig out this piece and say, oh, this is really a cool piece. And people say, oh, that was incredible, because it's got history. The history has given it its lettre de noblesse, you say. Huh? And so I find I'm a little sad that these big boys are not seeding for the future, because their revenues are enormous today. They could afford to create wacky products which don't sell, which would actually seed the next generation of icons in 20, 30, 40, 50 years, when somebody will arrive and say, remember in 2021 they did that weird thing, which was a total flop, but it was 50 years ago. We've got, maybe we can bring that to, and people, 50 years ago. And it's basically how we create icons. So what's important for the industry is to take risks. And I also think that it would be absolutely great that all these big brands allow themselves to fail. Because by failing, it means that you've actually taken a risk. And that they actually should devote X%, a small percent of their R&D and revenue to something which is completely wacky. In a way, that's what we did at Harry Winston. We created the Opus, and what's interesting is the Opus was actually created by other watchmakers. Now, it's a big difference between Opus and MB&F. Opus, I at Harry Winston would go and see great master watchmaker and say, do you have an idea? And the guy said, yeah, I've got this weird idea. Well, let's do that weird idea. And it's his, or well, actually his in this case, idea. At MB&F, they're all my wacky ideas, which are transforming reality. But I think that what's happening in typically the fashion world, what's happening in the accessory world, where the big players then go and see street artists, creators, and say, let's do a little capsule, let's do a little collaboration, and it's completely wacky, but if it fails, oh, it was that artist, he's just too polarizing, and it actually works, then the brand takes all the kudos, and it allows it to go to the next step. So maybe the next step of this industry, if you wanted to be more creative, is the big boys work with the small artisans. I think that would be an incredible moment in our history. The real creativity, it comes from a dictatorship. You can't have creativity in a democratic process. You can't have creativity by asking everybody their advice and what they would like. So you need a strong point of view who's either the owner, the CEO, or the art director, whoever's got the power to say, let's take a risk. So to all those three categories in the watch world, have fun, go for it. Every decade has had its challenges for our industry. I don't think anybody 30 years ago when I started in it and we were all virtually dying thought that we would be where we are today. Nobody thought in March last year that we would be doing so well today. So the only thing we're sure of is that we're sure of nothing. But starting from there, the issues of the industry are multiple. The first is we're an industry which people loved because it was artisanship, and it's become completely industrial, at least for most players. So that was an issue, but it's no more an issue because we've attracted, I'm talking of the industry, not us, has attracted a lot of people who are more interested in status than in watchmaking. So they're buying a beautiful piece of watchmaking not because they appreciate it, not because they understand it, but because it's a logo that they bear on their t-shirt. And from there onwards, I think that is one of the biggest dangers of our industry. It's what made it grow, but it's what, for me, is the biggest danger. Because when your clients cannot recognize quality, that's open, free range to sell them anything and everything. And it's very dangerous for an industry when its client doesn't actually understand the product it's buying. So do we have that problem? No, of course not. We are a miniature brand. We crafted 215 pieces last year, 215. Our clients are total watch geeks, and I say that with love. I'm a watch geek. Well, our clients are people like you and me, where we sit down and we can talk about watches for hours, and they have a complete recognition and understanding of what watchmaking is and what makes quality and what makes artisanship and hand engraving and hand finishing. Is there a point to all of that? No. Is it better than a machine finishing? Probably not, except for interior angles, of course. But that's what I signed up for. When I entered watchmaking 30 years ago, all of us were hand finishing our movements. And there were little ladies and little men doing small angling and the Côte de Genève and the engraving, and that's what made me fall in love with watchmaking. And that's why I am one of the very few still trying to capture that, to maintain that. Because even though it's a bit surreal, it's the reason we exist. Yes, of course, there are things which stung There were things where we were hurt, there were things which were difficult economically. But looking back, I'm today glad we had those issues because we learned. You do not learn from successes, but not much. Successes make you stronger into believing your own narrative. Errors, screw-ups, issues make you doubt what you're doing and try and understand what you're doing wrong and re-engineer yourself and try to avoid this going forward. And I feel we've grown so much more as human beings, as entrepreneurs, as creators, by all the issues we've had than through our successes. So we've had 4 horrible years, 2007, 2009, 2012 and 2014. And all 4 years for issues were different, luckily, which means that we're not too bad as entrepreneurs. We're not all the time reproducing the same error. 2007, I haven't even launched my first piece. My main supplier, who was supposed to actually engineer, manufacture the components and assemble the components of our movement, gets sold overnight to a brand. That brand had no intention of creating movements for third parties. A total nightmare. I nearly went bankrupt. I still wonder how I'm still around. 2009, global crisis. All our retailers are telling me, oh, look, we're not selling Pateks or Rolexes. Do you think we really want to order an MB&F? I remember it was that first year at SIHH where we had actually a suite. We were not in SIHH, where we were inviting retailers, and we had planned, what was it already? We'd planned 175 pieces to in our budget, and we took 17 pieces on order at SIHH, and we're not doing Basel in those years, so we'd taken 10% of the year, and everybody was telling us, forget it, we don't want your watches. 2012, it was a conjunction of many issues, suppliers, it was some of our retailers got upset with us because we did that incredible collab with Urwerk, which was called C3N5H309, I think, which is the chemical formula of nitroglycerin, and that definitely blew up in our face. And so a lot of our retailers got really upset with us because we'd done it and we were actually only selling them online. There were only 12 pieces. And so there was a blockade from our retailers towards us, and at the same time our suppliers started not delivering. We were going right into the wall. 2014 was excess of I started believing my narrative. I started thinking that we were immortal because every time we managed to get over our issues. So in 2012, I decided we're not going to do 1 caliber a year. We're going to do 2 calibers a year. And everybody in my team, knowing that every time we managed to succeed, said, oh, you must be right. Well, we cannot do 2 calibers a year. Financially, it's totally impossible. And in 2014, we nearly went right into the wall because our cash flow was negative like 7 months in a row. And we were like, I'm going to die. So 4 different years, 4 different reasons. We learned a ton from everything. Look at COVID. COVID, of course, in March last year, I thought it was going to be the end of the world. And we ended up last year having the best sellout year of our history. Sellout means the sales at our retailers, which was highest ever. And we're now having this insane stratospheric year this year. Well, yeah, 18 months ago, I was thinking, guys, I don't know if we'll survive at the end of the year. Every time we have a hard knock, every time we get super scared, we can become better. We become much better at what we do. We become more creative, more innovative, take more risks, rethink everything, because success makes you, and I think probably is what applies to the bigger brands, starts going that you just take the same recipe which made you successful and apply it again and again and again. But that doesn't work in 2021. the world is changing all the time. The customers are changing. The modus operandi of how this industry is working is changing, and we have to rethink ourselves. So COVID was for us a savior in a way, which is very weird. For me, the end goal of this whole project is for me to be proud the last day of my life. Everything I've done since I decided to create MB&F and actually change my life upside down was that whatever I do, I want to be proud of it going forward. So I feel like saying that the journey is the gift which keeps on giving. The ups and the downs, but every down, it's horrible. I'm going to welcome every down, hoping, of course, there'll be an up before, because that is what makes the journey interesting. Look, at the end of the day, you go to the Maldives on holiday, spend an incredible week in the Blue Lagoons. You can tell all your friends it's really cool, but are you going to talk about it in 20 years? No. You go and jump into a frozen fjord in the north of Norway in the middle of winter. I think you're going to tell your grandchildren that you actually did it. And that's what you realize, is that you need to take risks. You need to put yourself in danger to feel proud. If your life is just a walk in the park, I think my pride level would be much lower. The thing which keeps me up at night, I'll never be able to close. In 16 years, I've created an incredible team with 30 people here. Some are here 12, 13 years with us, virtually from the beginning. And what keeps me up at night is how, to keep them happy and motivated and encouraged, and B, at the same time, how to increase the level of competence in my team. So there's one faithfulness and my obligation towards this team, which has allowed us to be who we are, to be happy and remain with us, understanding that we're a very small company who for the last 7 years decided not to grow. So when you've got growth, you've got possibilities and increases of revenues, therefore increases of spending. I decided in 2013, the company's not going to grow anymore. So how do you keep great people when you don't grow? So that was really a big issue over the last 7 years. And the other is, when you don't grow, how do you increase the level of competence in your company? How the people who are there, they get better at what they do. And you realize, again, you have to choose. The members of your team have to be people who doubt themselves. People who believe their own narrative, people who are persuaded that they're good at what they do not grow. People who keep on doubting and going, I screwed up, I should do better, how can I do better, what is the other guys doing, how can we do this, are actually those who will bring us to the next step. So it's always people. It's always people. The second thing which keeps me up at night is, how do I make sure this company survives me? And there's a fantasy as a creator, is actually that the company doesn't survive you. It's a very, very selfish fantasy. It's saying, we're 2021, you know what? I will continue producing watches till 2028. I'll be, whatever will I be, 61 or something like that. And then in 2028, I close the company. Finished. Then you can imagine what will happen for the production of those next 7 years. People will go wild. That's a fantasy, because I just can't even. I thought about it, and then I was like, no, this can't go on. So once you take that fantasy out, because you're responsible to your customers, you're responsible to your team, you're responsible to everybody who's gravitated around your company to continue. At the same time, anything can happen to me. I'm 54, I started the company when I was 38. When you're 38, you definitely don't think about mortality. When you're 54, you think of it much more. So I've already started losing a couple of friends around me. And it can happen like that for stupid reasons from one day to the other. The other thing you realize also is I have never been so gung-ho and so creative, but maybe when I turn 60, that big 60 is super scary, I must admit, that I may not want to be in this whole crazy race, because this is a race. I mean, not a small entrepreneur doing what we do by not racing. And maybe I'll want to take a step back. And so how do I make sure this company survives the fact either I die or that I want to take a step back? So it's been unconsciously being done over the years. The first thing I did was actually going to move to Dubai. That was one of the many reasons 7 years ago. I've been managing this company from 6,000 kilometers away when pre-COVID, nobody did that. I mean, now everybody is on Zooms and at home office and whatever. That did not exist. And I really wanted to see if I could disentangle myself, because I was the king of micromanagement. Because I'd created the company. It was in my flat and everybody who came after was my team and everything. So I was looking into every little detail. Going back to Dubai, take a big step back. Relinquishing the role of CEO de facto. There is no CEO in this company. We're ex-directors, with 5 directors, and I am the creative director. Do I supervise? Of course I supervise. But de facto, I don't want to be the CEO of the company, so I've taken a big step back, and I haven't been on everybody's back, and everybody knows what they have to do. We work as a college of directors, and we're 5 out of the 31, so 26 people directly under us. And then if I'm only the creative director, how do I make sure that if I pass away, the company continues? Well, the first thing is we've got now 10 calibers in the pipeline. 10 calibers, 10 concepts. So we've created 19, there are 10 in the pipeline, so which will come out in the 5 to 10 years to come. So that gives some time. Second, with the body of work which has been created, an art director, a creative director can be hired, and then not only has he got already 5 to 10 years in front of him, but he can then rework what has been done, exactly like Karl Lagerfeld did to Coco Chanel, and now Karl is not there and somebody else is doing it. Now, I'm not trying to say I'm Karl Lagerfeld, but it's the whole idea is that somebody can come with that body. If I disappear after 3 calibers, how is the next person going to do anything? Because there's not a body of work. There's a body of work of 19 movements which have been done. So I think that's possible. Of course, everything is done that financially the company is super sane. We have never had any debt, any losses. We're totally auto-financed with no shareholders. So it's a super sane company. If something happens, it's there. And you add on top of that, and I've said that in a few IG lives, which amazed a lot of people, so I'm going to say it again, is if all of that doesn't work, my team has one clear order. If you feel once I've gone that for whatever reason the company is going to tank, the last thing you do before you pull the plug is you put all the plans of all our calibers online. Open source. Everybody can see them. Because whatever we do, even though it looks completely crazy, is steel and brass. And a great mechanic and a great watchmaker can remake every single part. So, if something happens, it will be open source and everybody can go and find the plans if they want to redo a part in the after-sale service, because that's actually what keeps me up at night. Yeah, so there you go. That's the plan. Of course, never anything happens according to plan, but that's how we're trying to make this happen. So the last 12 months have been mind-boggling for us. Last semester, 50 pieces went out from the stores. 50 more than what we could deliver. This first semester, 60 went out on top of what we could deliver, which means that in the next 12 months, if we stay where we are and demand stays where it is without even increasing, there will not be a watch anywhere to be had in any store in the world. So we're at a point where we have to have a hard look at each other and say, I think we have to increase. We're putting together a plan now this summer, which is incredibly aggressive. We expect to increase by 11% every year. But demand this year outstrips production already by 43%. So that means that even if we do manage to do plus 11%, we'll still be a massive issue. But this has never been about business. This has always been about having the means to create the next piece. So we stuck to our guns. We will grow a little bit. It'll give a new dynamic to my team. We'll be able to hire more people and maybe invest a little bit more money, which is cool. And I must admit, it makes me happy. And I know when I told the team 3 weeks ago that we're going to start after 7 years of frozen growth, we're going to do a new cycle of growth. Everybody was like, yeah, wow, let's go. And so I realized it's also going to help motivation in the team, but it's going to be on our pace. Because if the demand goes down, we'll retract. It's not like a business model where a manager says, we are here and we're going to be here, and what are we going to do to be here? No. Us, we're here, the demand is here. We expect in 5 years to be more or less delivering the amount of products which are demanded today. So we're basically trying to catch up with demand. It's not our desire. A completely different mindset as an entrepreneur. I've always looked forward to tomorrow since I'm at MB&F. Because writing your own story, there is absolutely nothing which can give you the same adrenaline or thrill. Nothing. So yeah, no Monday mornings at MB&F.